Okay, should I start it?
Yes, you can start.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Alan, and in today's thesis defense, I will discuss the topic of how to combat cybersickness, perspectives from VR researchers, content creators, and gamers. So my first questions for you is, have you ever experienced VR sickness or cyber sickness before? If you have, please give me a thumbs up. Yeah, I can definitely see some people have it. Yeah, I guess I'll just saw Steve. So why is it important to study cybersickness? This is because virtual reality has been used in many domains including medications, educations, entertainment, research, etc. And cybersickness is one of the major obstacles that modern VR application face. Some of the cybersickness symptoms, including nausea, fatigue, disorientations, dizziness, all this can lead to user safety concern, negative user experience, and even the termination of VR experience. So after I done some of literature research on some of the factors and the strategies, I found there are many factors and strategies that are affecting cybersickness. So like, for example, like human factors, including biological sex, age, previous experience with VR, technical factors, including, um, different hardware and software, how they affect cybersickness, and visual content, like different games and different VR experience, external factors like consumables, like, drugs, different products, and also how environments change will affect cybersickness. At the same time, there are also a lot of behaviors or strategy that can combat cybersickness. This including behavior strategies, hardware and software modifications, environmental modifications, and gradual adaptations. So after I basically go through everything, including the factors and strategies, I found two common grounds here. So the first is everything we just discussed is under isolated lab settings. Basically, they are tested under lab settings. And the second thing is most testing groups are university students who are basically new or they have little experience to VRs. So this raises the research gaps in my study or in my thesis. So the first research gap is how everything we just discussed about the factors and the strategies, how everything discussed and tested under live settings can be efficiently utilized in real world settings among diverse VR users. And the second research gap is about there's a need of diverse perspectives from experienced VR users across multiple domains, including research, content creations, and gaming. So you might want to ask some more questions like that. Like, why are you only interested in perspective from VR researchers, content creators, and gamers? So this is because those three groups represent the most diverse range of experience with VRs. And they have the most hands-on experience from those who study as researchers, who created as content creators or developers, to those use it most extensively as VR gamers. So here we form four research questions. In the first research questions, I want to investigate what factors do VR experts in our study identify as basically can increase or decrease the likelihood of cybersickness. And the second research questions is about what strategies can we learn or derive from VR expert to mitigate or avoid cybersickness. The third research question is a little bit different from the second research question, is what novel strategies that are beyond existing literatures for do VR experts suggest in our group, and how does those strategies compare to existing literatures? And the last research questions will be what practical guidelines can we synthesize from existing literature with our expert suggestion to minimize and reduce cybersickness, to enhance user comfort. So this slide is showing a study procedures of mine. In this studies, I have two groups. The first group is the interview group. We have 17 participants. We stopped collecting participants this because when they reach to 17, we stopped collecting because there is no new qualitative data or themes coming up. This we call as data saturations. And another group we call it's a survey groups. We collected participants, 132 participants. And you can see at the bottom, this is the study procedures, starting with interview group. They will start with a consent form, and I conducted a semi-structured open-ended interview. And then they follow up with online questionnaires. And in the survey groups, we start with the consent form, but we don't include in interviews. We only ask them to answer the online questionnaires. So there are 132 participants analyzed. So in the interview questions, we have a couple of themes and a couple of points we want to mention. So at the first, we want to ask what's their experience with VR, how they know about VR. And we also want to ask what's their experience with cybersickness, what are some symptoms they experience, and we also want to ask what specific moment they start experiencing cybersickness. And number 4 is one of the important sectors we will ask the most is about what are some strategies that they use to combat cybersickness, or what are some strategies they heard from the literatures or any videos or any other resources to combat cybersickness. And concluding questions will ask them their opinions on how they think to improve VR technology to prevent cybersickness. So here is an example of how we constructed the interview questions. So we probably won't be able to ask all the questions. And this is really because some of the participants answer, during the general cybersickness, some of the participants answer how they already answer basically how they combat cybersickness. So we will help them to lead through some of the questions, and some of the questions will be asked, but not everything is here. So in the survey questions, we have subjective readings, including 3 different sections. The first section is demographics. Second is about factors. They will basically rated the factors affecting cybersickness. And the third is about cybersickness mitigation strategies. And below, you can see this is a graph showing how they will rate one of the factors affecting cybersickness. So this is one of the factors, and we ask them to rate it in a visual dialogue that you can see basically on the right, it will basically decrease the likelihood they think this factor will decrease the likelihood of cybersickness. And in the middle is no effect, and on the left is this factor will increase the likelihood of cybersickness. So in this surveys, we particularly interested in human factors and external factors. So this is because most literature we found only investigates technical factors and different visual contents. And so this leaves us there's so many human factors such as health and previous experience VR, and external factors such as environmental change and consumable, how those factors affecting cybersickness, this leaves unclear. So that's why I want to basically put emphasize on the human factors and external factors on the surveys. So here is a graph of showing a rank of all the factors we asked the participant to rate it. As you can see in the yellow, this is where I mark it as a human factors, and the blue is the external factors. So you can clearly see some of the factors at the top as the most efficient one to combat cybersickness, and what are some strategies at the bottom that will basically increase the likelihood or trigger cybersickness. So some of the key points from the graph is there are more human factors affecting cybersickness than external factors. And then being familiar with VR and overall feeling comfortable are the most influential human factors. and also they are rated as the most influential factors at all. Having a good airflow and audio or technical cues corresponding to visual cues are also the most influential external factors. So they will basically all help to decrease the likelihood of cybersickness. And in our qualitative results on the factors, here are some key findings. 10 participants out of 17 participants mentioned about adaptations to cybersickness, and some example like familiarity with virtual environments, locomotion methods, content and game types. 6 participants mentioned about that, and 5 participants mentioned about durations of VR exposure in each sessions, and lastly, 5 participants mentioned about how overall health, including physical and mental health, affect their likelihood of triggering cybersickness. So in this slide, I will show you a comparison between the qualitative results and the quantitative results on the factors. So some of the key takeaways are adaptations or habituations was constantly mentioned and ranked as the most influential factor by all participants. Overall health, including physical and mental health, was also commonly reported and ranked high. So here we have another graph showing a rank of the strategies we asked the participant to rate it. Because of the time, I won't investigate or talk about everything, but I will talk about a few ones that has sparked or that is interesting to discuss. So in total, we have 35 strategies. And as you can see at the top, taking a break, reduce accelerations, like reducing jerky movements, are the most efficient behavior strategies, and they also rank it as the most efficient strategies at all. Increasing airflow as an environmental modification is also rated really high in the graph, and switching different locomotion modes, as I marked it here, also as a software modifications, is also rated high as well. And at the bottom, we can see consuming marijuana, cannabis, CBD is rated as the lowest efficient strategy, which means these strategies will most likely to cause cybersickness from the participants we have. So in our qualitative results on the strategies, here are some key findings. 11 participants mentioned about taking a break, and 6 participants mentioned about limiting physical and virtual movement as a behavior and physical techniques. And 10 participants mentioned about software and hardware adjustment, including adjusting locomotion methods. And 6 participants mentioned about high frame rate, super important to reduce cybersickness or prevent cybersickness. A comparison between the qual and the quantitative results on the strategies, and some key takeaways are participants rated and constantly mentioned about behavior strategies are the most efficient strategies, such as taking a break, reduce movement, and software and hardware adjustment is also one of the most efficient strategies. One of the examples including adjusting locomotion modes that a lot of people mentioned about switching locomotion mode to teleportations that will help them to reduce or prevent cybersickness. So in the discussions, I have a couple of points, and the first point starts with adaptation and habituations to cybersickness, including repeated exposure to VR over time that participant mentioned about this, and also in our quantitative results, maintain healthy and physical and mental conditions. Examples such as feeling well, being comfortable, no headache, no hangover, and even have a light meal before enter VR will definitely help to reduce likelihood of cybersickness. And all these 2 points answer the first research questions on what factors do VR experts think that will basically alleviate or reduce cybersickness. So the next point is about the behavior strategies. Examples such as take a breaks, reduce movements, including rotations and translation in VR will definitely help. Some of the other strategies, including towards software and hardware, including switch locomotion mode to teleportations, is also rated and also constantly mentioned. And one lastly about environmental modifications as a strategies. Some more examples including having a good airflow, like good ventilations, and maintaining a comfortable temperatures. So all those 3 points will answer the second research questions on what factors can we derive from all the VR experts. And we move on to the number 3 research questions is about what are some strategies that people use that has not been discussed in the existing literatures. So one interesting strategies I found is the integrations of path-through. So path-through is a feature that you in VR that you can see the outside world, but you can also interact with the VR systems. So as you can see in the videos. And this, like the participant mentioned about using the path-through can really help to basically help them to distinguish what is a reality and what is a virtual world. And it will also help them to basically preventing them from, if they move around in VR, they will help to basically hitting some objects, causing them injuries, and sort of like that. And after like last research questions about the general guidelines, so after I submit the thesis, I realized there's so much things I can do to basically help VR users to basically learn about how to combat cybersickness. So I came up with a system like this. So at first, we will basically list all the insights from our VR experts or our findings, and we critically analyze both insights from ours and guidelines from existing literatures. And then finally, we synthesize or combine everything into a revised version of the guidelines. So this is a procedure of how I conducted to do the guidelines. So we separate the guidelines into 3 different groups. The first group is about guidelines for VR-related researchers, and these guidelines are really basically aimed to help VR researchers to demonstrate participants any VR or to run any VR experiments. So like at first, insights from VR experts, they suggest overall health will influence cybersickness, and they also inform the likelihood of cybersickness will basically, if they inform the likelihood of cybersickness to participants, this will cause them later to have cybersickness, might have cybersickness later. And in the middle is the guidelines from existing literatures. So one of the literature suggesting inform the user to basically the following VR content will trigger cybersickness, and the participant will have a choice to proceed or not. So in our revised versions, I think instead of focusing on explaining the possibility of causing cybersickness, researchers can encourage participants to have a positive mindset before VR content and offering the solutions to combat cybersickness. And another general guidelines for another part is the guidelines for content creators and developers. So insights from our expert that suggests start slowly with unfamiliar VR experiments will help reduce cybersickness. And one of the existing literature, they suggest newer VR users, they suggest to start slowly and gradually build up their exposures. So, and in our revised version of the guidelines, I think it's critical to mention about basically create a low pressure sandbox environment or tutorial sessions in a short period that participants will freely explore this environment and learn everything. It will not learn everything, but they will get used to the locomotion methods, and basically they will start with some simple and gradually builds up with complex locomotion techniques. Oh, sorry. And one lastly is about guidelines for general VR users. So these guidelines will help all VR users who utilize VR, for games or entertainments. And insights from our VR experts suggest results found taking anti-motion sickness medicine will help. And one of the guidelines from the existing literature also suggests people should or users should take a preventive medicines when they start feeling symptoms of cybersickness. However, I think after I think it critically analysis those 2 points, I think we need to consider the side effect before for the user to before to take the medicines. And some of the medicines they are not readily accessible to all the users. So instead of like consuming different medicines, I suggest to basically consider consuming easily accessible natural remedies such as ginger or ginger-based products or even chewing gums. And in the conclusions, we found like subjective adaptations and overall health are the most influential factors to affect cybersickness. Behavior and software and hardware strategies can be more efficient to combat cybersickness. Integration of path-through is an interesting technique that help participants prevent cybersickness. So this is the conclusion I have. And for the future work, there's a need of longitudinal study to examine the effectiveness of how those strategies can be used over long period of time. And also in the future is to address how our findings relate to other expert groups or user group, such as people with use VR for educations, training, tourism, and all other users group. So for the future school. And lastly, I want to thank Bernhard, Tekla, Bernhard, Kenneth, Evan, Rose, Yao, and all the colleagues at my iSpace Lab. And I will also want to thank all the committee members, Alyssa, Steve, and I also want to thank all the audience for listening to my presentations. And lastly, this is my thesis summary and just basically summary everything I just discussed here. And thank you so much for listening to my presentations and providing any feedbacks.